Hi all, good morning.
Hey everybody, how are you?
Doing good, thanks.
You guys can hear me?
Philip, Ellen, Elaine, Gary on the call. Oh, this is so exciting. I'm still expecting one more person, maybe a few more. We will give them 2 minutes, Barry, and then we'll get started.
No rush. We can hang out for 5 minutes because I know people
Yeah.
sometimes have difficulty signing in and I don't want them to miss anything. Well, thank you guys for coming, by the way. I'm excited to kind of, walk you through, a little bit of my history and a little bit of my work, and tell me real quick about who you guys are.
I'm gonna go, Gary, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, Gary, Colorado Springs, Colorado. I'm a landscape photographer, and I look forward to hearing about what you do.
Thanks. Pleasure to meet you, Gary.
How about Philip?
Hey, Philip.
Hey, Barry. Philip Rubino. I'm in Castle Rock, Colorado, and I do a little bit of everything and interested in always learning some new skills here. So I'm hoping to get a little bit of better understanding about how to be good at what you do, and hopefully
Awesome.
Get into that.
So what's your specialty? Tell me again.
I don't really have a specialty. I shoot landscape, I shoot stock, I shoot events, I shoot sports, whatever.
Awesome. Jack of all trades photographer.
Yep.
Elaine, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Elaine.
Was that me
Yep,
or
that's
Ellen?
That's you. Oh, yep, I
Okay.
got Ellen and Elaine, so I'm gonna ask you. Yep.
So I shoot mainly landscape nature. I do some food photography as well on the side, but I've been really interested in learning more about real estate photography. I've done a few things for a friend of mine who was a real estate agent in the area.
Cool.
So I'd really kind of like to learn a lot more about the real estate photography part and see how I could incorporate that into a part-time, sort of side gig type of thing.
Or full time. We'll see how it goes.
Well,
maybe you'll love it that much.
My husband and I are looking at possibly being in the retirement realm within, 5 to 10 years. So yeah, if I
me
could
too.
definitely transition that, it would be fantastic.
Awesome.
To get out of the desk job.
Yes, ma'am.
Ellen, you want to
Excuse me,
introduce
but I do
yourself?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Ellen Nelson. I'm a magazine photographer, actually, so I get to shoot a lot of all sorts of stuff. In fact, tomorrow morning, I'm shooting a kitchen interior for a cover of a magazine.
Fantastic.
So this will be good to get a real nice kind of a preview before I shoot the interior. But I shoot portraits, just if you can think about it, just anything that the magazine assigns me. On the side, I do a lot of headshots because guess what? That actually pays.
That pays the bills, huh?
That pays the bills. So I'm finding that I'm doing more and more headshots. But I love landscapes. I love anything that gets me to have a camera in my hand.
Well said. Well said. Well, today, I hope everybody's ready to take a journey of about 30 years of my life. And forgive me if it comes off rather indulgent, but that's what Susan asked me to do. So I'm going to basically tell you a little bit about where I started and the transition of really my career decade by decade. And of course, there's going to be lots of room for questions and comments from everybody. And I think Susan is going to be mostly kind of the moderator of that. And so I'm looking forward to sharing a little bit about myself. And, my goal in doing this is always, and this is not the first time I've done this, I've done a handful of these, is to kind of share my inspiration from my work in a way that hopefully gets you as photographers to be more inspired about your own work. By no means does that mean you need to shoot like me or shoot what I shoot. In fact, quite the contrary. I mean, let's be honest, most of the time we always have our own vision about what's most important to us and what pays the bills or what inspires us as artists or as business people, as photographers. But having attended a lot of these, especially over the last year, when I was on the other side of the screen, the ones that excited me the most, truthfully, were people who didn't shoot anything what I shot. There are people who shot landscape, people who shot fine art, people that had an interesting background, that just somehow got me to think a little bit different. So with that said, I guess we'll begin, unless Susan, there's anything else you wanted to cover before we started.
No, I think we good. We still got a couple people coming in and everything, but we're
Okay, we can wait another,
starting
let's
point.
wait another minute or so. What I'm going to suggest is, because I've been through these before, because I'm going to try to make my images go full screen. We're going to do some screen sharing. So I think each and every person has their own Zoom window, whatever. So my suggestion would be to, well, minimize or make go away any Zoom windows so you can just see my screen share. I'm not sure if that's going to automatically happen or not. You guys may have to do that on your own computers. I'm going to try to do that so it doesn't distract me, because I get very distracted if there's too much stuff on the screen at once. So you let me know when you would like me to start, and I'll do the screen share, Susan. Should I start that now?
I would say let's just go ahead and start. Like I said, we're recording this. So let me introduce you guys. I'm so excited that you're all here for our first virtual conference. We're recording this. John Fielder is in the other room with our president, Gina. So that will be recorded, so you can go back and watch that later. Definitely, you can mute yourselves. Most everybody's got themselves muted, but you can ask questions in chat, and we'll stop, and Barry will answer those questions. We're really excited about what he is going to share with us, because this is so different than what we've had before. So welcome, Barry, go ahead and start.
Okay, let me click share screen. Give me a minute. And I'm going to hide this window. Forgive me, guys. I'm going to minimize my Zoom window. I don't want to look at it. Okay, everybody. My name is Barry Grossman, and I am a photographer of interior design and architecture. My business is called Grossman Photography, and I've been doing this for over 30 years professionally. And today I wanted to walk you through quite a bit over this 2-hour period that hopefully gets us inspired to really demand the most of what it is we find exciting in photography. And so I'm going to walk you through my background, of course, show you a lot of images, discuss my philosophy of image making. And that's not only how I shoot, but it's why I shoot the way I do. And obviously very, very significant to all of our work, I would imagine these days, is the post-production component. So my philosophy of post-production and how it applies to my image making. I'm going to talk a little bit about branding. And what I mean by branding is how we brand ourselves as professionals. I think that's very important when it comes to presenting our work, presenting our business to potential clients. Susan and I talked about this yesterday, and I think she's right. I think the camera system that we're using is relevant to this brand of architectural of photography, which is the specialty of shooting interiors and architecture. And so I am going to talk a little bit about my camera system, what I work with, and how I feel it advantages my shooting and my approach to shooting. We'll talk a little bit about my teaching, and that's involved over the past 3 or 4 years, online consultations, out in the field workshops that I've done with people and groups of people, and of course these webinars. We may have plenty of time for Q&A throughout that beginning or the bulk of that, and then I think a lot of folks will be interested in me doing a demonstration of how I put my images together, and why I do what I do, and strategically how I shoot. And then at the very end, if we wanted to get into the business of shooting interiors and architecture and how you can make a living, I'll offer you my thoughts and my experiences and how I've made a living exclusively in this specialty. So let's begin. I want to share with you just a handful of images that really span 30 years of my photographic career. I specialize predominantly in shooting residential interior and architecture. And so between that and my resort work, I think I've developed somewhat of a style that I've kind of become known for. And to me, that's one of the most important aspects of being a professional photographer, is having a style. I've traveled around the world, shooting resort, architecture, hospitality. Obviously, most of my commercial and residential work is here in the United States, where I live. And I shoot a lot of commercial work for architectural firms, general contractors. You know, in this specialty, there's a lot of ways to make a living. There's a lot of things to shoot. And these are a few examples of some of my more commercial or mixed use interiors that I've shot for architectural firms. Again, the lion's share of my portfolio historically has been residential work. And so for me, that means if my client's an interior designer, making their work be the star of the show. That's always been the most important thing to me. You might want to know why I'm showing this still to you, because this is about what inspired me to even pick up a camera in the first place. And some of you may or may not recognize what the heck that building is in the background. Maybe this will help you a little bit more. Really, my educational background and the beginning of what made me who I am as a creative person came from my film school experience. I went to film school between the years, let me think, 1984 and 1992. That's a lot of film school. I went to Syracuse University and New York University. And to me, these types of images, this is all classic cinematography. These first handful from Citizen Kane, Orson Welles, one of my film heroes, Greg Toland, cinematographer. This type of look is just what got me excited to pick up a camera. Of course, I was shooting stills long before I got to college, but when I was really honing my craft and studying lighting, studying and learning composition from the masters, you know, the truth is, it was cinematographers that got me the most excited. Magnificent Ambersons, by the way, this is still Greg Toland's, one of my cinematography heroes. The use of light and shadow, most all of this is a built set, which is another thing that's miraculous, because they were really breaking those conventions back then, because back then I'm talking like the late 30s, early 40s, you didn't get to look up like this. You know, film sets above the actors' heads were 50 lights, not sets that seem to go on and on and on. And this low angle shooting up was really unique to filmmaking back then. And Greg Toland is certainly one of the pioneers of that. Interestingly enough, we're going to flash backward about 20 years or so. Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, again, German Expressionism. You know, how does this influence real estate photography? Hopefully, we'll make that discovery together over the next hour and a half or 2 hours. But you know, you can see the angles, the way things are dramatically composed. A lot of this light, by the way, that you see in this image was actually a painted set. So this is so primitive and back in the earliest days of film that the set and production people and the cinematographers as well, I guess, were working together to paint in the lighting, which is really cool. Most of those lights that you see, light projection, is actually painted, which really is brilliant. These are all stills from the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. We can flash forward about 70 years to the first Blade Runner, one of the most influential films for me, because when this came out, I was basically a young filmmaker entering film school, and it's really a more contemporary version of film noir. I mean, contemporary, we're not talking 40 years ago, but the same vibe is there, isn't it? You know, the backlit look, And so how did that affect who I am? Well, when I made it to film school, and if you indulge me, and I hope this doesn't look dreadful on your screen, I'm going to share with you a handful of images from some of the work that I did when I was 19, 20 years old in film school. This is all shot with, and I hope you guys can hear me okay, 16 millimeter and super 16 millimeter movie film, of course. Clearly, this is all pre-digital, and this is all lit in that same style to the images that we were just looking at. And again, the reason I'm walking you through this is not because I'm into werewolf films, but it's because, but I am, it's because this really affects the photography I do today, believe it or not. And I hope you guys are sensitive to being able to see how the work I did, geez, how long is it? This is over 30 years old, what we're looking at, really changed, not changed, but affected how I'm working today. So this is no small feat shooting this stuff, you guys. Everything is in camera, everything is in front of the camera. We built our own sets for this film, which is almost unheard of for a student film. Most of this was shot in the upstate New York or inside of New York City while I was at NYU. This film did go on to do extremely well for the director, who was not me, by the way. I was a cinematographer on this. He won a Directors Guild Award for this film. We did pretty well in the film circuit, the film festival circuit, I should say, in the early 1990s. But walking in and out of the lighting, everything here had to be lit. I mean, that's another thing that another takeaway I hope you guys will take with you when you start looking at some of my early interiors photography, which is coming up next, I promise. Everything had to be lit. There was no available light photography back then. If you didn't light it, it didn't look good. At least that's how I felt, that's how I learned. And again, that really went back to 1938, 1941, Citizen Kane. Those sets were so, and everything in front of the camera was so controlled. And I still take that to shoots that I'm doing today, even though obviously there is a trend towards naturalism. So I'll let you enjoy a few of these images for the next minute. All the lightning effects that you see were done with an old-fashioned lightning box, with two sparked metal tips touching. All these effects that you see were done in camera. We implemented front projection, rear screen projection. I mean, all the old tricks that those guys and ladies were using 50, 60 years prior to us shooting this.
Where did you go to school at?
Syracuse University and New York University. This film was shot while I was at NYU. I was a filmmaker at Syracuse University with a major in film, art, and photography, and at NYU cinematography. NYU is much more specialized in terms of their, how they wanted you to choose your program. I hope this doesn't look too mushy and out of focus on your guys' screen, but
No, it looks fine.
indulge me, it's almost over. It is kind of cool. I literally haven't seen this in 10 years. And so this is a montage that I put together right after I graduated film school in an effort to market myself as a young cinematographer. This is all rear screen projection. That's stop motion. You see the sun setting and the clouds moving. That's all done with stop motion photography on an old Bolex camera. And that was rear projected behind our main character. And that's the last shot of the Werewolf of Praxton Hall. And how does that all relate to shooting interiors? I hope that becomes obvious as we're going. So interestingly enough, when I was at NYU in the late 80s, early 90s, I was also living in and trying to earn a living as a photographer. And so these images that I'm going to share with you right now are images that I shot in the early 90s. This is all shot with 4x5 film that at some point I had scanned into my computer, and I was able to thankfully hold on to this. I still have crates of 4x5 transparencies. And back in the day when you were shooting interiors and architecture, you needed to shoot 4x5 transparencies or you were not taken seriously. So you can see the type of vibe I was going for. I was still using tungsten lights. This is all lit with Mole Richardson, Fresnel tungsten lighting, painstakingly done and lit, most of it at night. This was the vibe back then. This is almost like lighting a set, and that's kind of how it was for me early on in my career. All film, waiting for the right time of day, waiting for the twilight to happen, lighting with tungsten lighting for the interiors. We had a light inside every one of those windows and doors on the right to throw and cast those projections on the floor. Again, 4x5 transparency, very carefully composed. This is the type of image that probably took about 2 hours to shoot. No retouching, by the way. This is all in camera, one shot, one frame. You know, part of my job, and we are going to transition to newer work, as an interior design and architectural photographer, and that's really how I think of myself, is being a storyteller. And the stories that I tell these days are the stories of what an interior design can do for the person who lives there, what an architectural structure, how it affects us when we look at it, how we style an interior. So there are still storytelling elements to my work. This is relatively modern. This is probably, by modern, I mean recent. This is probably done in 2019. So this is about a year and a half, let's say, or so ago that I shot this. Again, trying to tell a story, trying to tell my client's story, which is not that different than when I was shooting for, you know, the directors. And of course, I didn't show you this, and nor will I show you the 95 or 100 commercials and music videos that I shot over about a 10, 12-year period. I'm telling somebody's story, and I still feel that's super important. You know, if you're a fine art photographer and if you're doing your own thing, you're a storyteller and you're telling your own story. I applaud that. And one of the cool things about my work is I still feel like I get to put my signature on each and every one of these images. Each and every one of these spaces is, I feel, as much mine as it is my client's. Couple of resort shots here. Again, simple, nothing extraordinary here, but just simple decisions, simple framing, and obviously composition is super important to our work, as is light quality. And my kind of thought process when I show up at an interior, or if I show up at home, is where's the light going to be, and how do I make it work for me? How do I make it beautiful? How do I make it dramatic? How do I make my shot feel special? Because let's be honest, any photographer can show up and take pictures of these rooms. It's finding those special moments to make it feel elevated. Even if you're going for a natural look, or even if you're going for a look that's admittedly a little bit more stylized, whatever aesthetic you embrace, how do you make it feel special? And so for me, it's simple composition and wonderful light, because to me, it just enhances the spaces that I'm shooting. This is a huge debate these days natural lighting versus artificial lighting. And I use the word artificial kicking and screaming, because I don't like to use that word artificial, because I don't think any lighting is artificial. Now, the application of light can be used in a way that feels artificial, but I am a firm believer in using photographic tools like lights to create a mood or an atmosphere, and that vibe can be done with quote unquote natural light, or that vibe can be achieved the way I do it with a lot of photography tools, a lot of lighting instruments. And I'm going to hopefully give you guys a real peek into how I do some of these things before we're done today. Because a shot like this, for example, I hope you can't tell what the quote unquote natural light is and what the quote artificial light is, because it certainly is a mix of both. So just to kind of be clear about it, that beautiful sunbeam coming in, hitting that chair in the background and hitting the wall in the background, hitting the floor in that back area, that's my light. Is it artificial? I guess that's open for debate. That beautiful sunbeam pouring through the foreground, that's also my light. Am I lighting the trees in the background? No, that's somebody else's lighting. But is it natural? You know, that's where the artistry comes in. That's where being able to blend and combine, working with what's there and what you're bringing to the scene lighting wise, you know, that's what makes your signature on the work. Same thing here, same thing here. What's my lighting? What's natural lighting? Same thing here. And so as a photographer who shoots rooms, whether they're hotel rooms or living rooms, you know, seeking out the light can really change how things feel. And that's kind of exciting to me. Obviously, most important, I think, maybe 51% important over 49, is how we compose our images. And I always say that camera placement and framing and composition are the most powerful aspects. I won't speak for everybody, but of my work, I firmly believe in all photography. What we choose to put inside the frame, what we choose to take out of the frame, the focal length of the lens that we use, how close the camera is to our subject matter, it really is the determining factor on what makes for a quote unquote effective or dramatic or beautiful image. And so for me, I think you can see there's a certain consistency to how I like to compose. You know, and when you shoot architecture and interiors, I'm a very specific kind of person in my life, and I try to frame deliberately when it comes to my photography. So for me, that means being able to edit in what's in front of the camera while you're shooting, framing the most important elements of the room and making it special. You know, these days with social media being so kind of overwhelming my industry, the ability to shoot detail images for social media is huge. And so I'm really looking for this type of image making a lot these days. Now, back in the day, it was magazine covers, and these types of compositions, these vignettes or cameos, these moments, I've had some of my clients call them moments. These moments are magazine cover shots. But with social media being so kind of, again, pervasive, this is the type of stuff that my clients want, these detail images. And so this is really fun. I mean, this is longer focal lengths, typically, still very deliberate in terms of how we compose, and just having, exploring and enjoying the act of shooting. And so you're getting a pretty good cross section from my portfolio of different types of subject matter, but these are just detail shots that really are highly sought after in the industry, at least for within my client pool. Super important is having a style. And for me, my style is really influenced by the subject matter, let's be honest. If you're shooting a bright, sun-drenched room on Miami Beach, which is what this is, or if you're shooting a moody bar in New York City, or if you're a landscape photographer and you're on a mountainside somewhere, creating your own style is, to me, the most important thing. And in my world, that means if a potential client reaches out to me and says, hey, I saw a picture on the cover of this magazine and I thought it might be yours. It really looked like you. Or I'll get a phone call or an email saying, hey, we saw what you did for so-and-so client. We want you to do something like that for us. We want your look for us. To me, that's the biggest compliment, because I don't want to shoot like everybody else. I want to have my own style. And I think as photographers, whether we're in business or whether we're doing it for art, fine art purposes, we want to have our signature on our images where people say, I can tell that was hers. I can tell that was his. And to me, it's really about I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Do you do the styling, the setup, like?
Yes, that's a great question. That's a great question. Most of the time when I'm shooting an interior like this, or like a lot of them that you're looking at, I have my designer client with me. Not all the time. I have a few relationships with some clients who basically give me the keys to the place and they disappear and I do my thing for them. So when I arrive, and there's not much styling in this image, so let me move to another one. I am working with the designer most of the time to tweak the props, to pull some things out, to adjust the chairs that need adjusting. That is absolutely part of the job description. You need to be very sensitive to your subject matter. You need to be sensitive to how the chairs look, how the drapes are being hung, how the pillows look. Absolutely, I don't want to say I'm doing the styling on every shot, but you really have to be involved with how things are looking, and there's a certain amount of diplomacy you need to employ. When you say to your designer, hey, you know what, that thing in the background, or those two butterflies on the left, they don't look good. We need to take those out. Can we replace them with something else? They're too small. You get my point. So there's a give and take, and there's a collaboration that is important. Is there another question?
Nope, no so far. Anybody have any questions real quick before he goes on?
I won't go too fast, but I know there's a lot to look at. Go ahead.
Nope, I think
So
we're
here's
good.
some more. Okay, here's some more examples of, and speaking of sound, here's an example. Setting up a shot like this, I love simplicity. I love the clean look of the architecture and the staircase. And so I'm taking more things out than I'm putting in, just to kind of bring our focus to that which is, I think, most important. Risk taking. I put this section in for you guys because, if we keep shooting the same stuff over and over and over again, that kind of breeds complacency. And so again, it depends who the clients are, but I'm trying wherever I can to take a risk or two, to do something special. Put a light on the other side of that partition and throw that light through to cast those interesting shadows on the floor and on the ceiling. just because, you know, for a sense of whimsy. Put my camera in an unusual place, and here my camera is literally inside a fireplace to get this shot. I know the fire wasn't lit, obviously, but taking a risk and doing something cool just because, and mostly it's for, you know, having that thrill of being able to express myself, but it's also because, you know, I want my clients' work to sing and to be, you know, placed on the highest pedestal I can. And so I'm trying to find cool places to put my camera wherever I can. You know, here's another example, trying to tell a story. And we, like, for example, we shot this is a master bathroom suite dressing area. And we shot the bathroom and we shot the dressing area kind of conventionally. And we were kind of walking and cleaning up, whatever. And I turned and I was like, wow, look at this. This is pretty cool. So yes, I did have to Photoshop out the reflection of the camera, which would have been smack dab in the lower middle of that mirror. But this is fun. You know, the repetition of the mirrors relates to that sculptural piece, relate to the shape of the chair. And this is kind of what I like to do. Take a few risks in terms of camera placement. Who am I shooting for? Well, I basically told you who I'm shooting for. I'm shooting for a wide range of clients. Now, not all of them are, you know, give me that very long creative leash. Unfortunately, some of them are a little bit more kind of commercial clients, and I'm shooting that type of work for them. That's a bit more straightforward, a bit more conventional, still trying to do it beautifully and amazingly, but trying to make it feel like it belongs in their portfolio as much as it belongs in mine. And when you're an assignment-based photographer, I mean, you need to shoot for your clients. Building relationships, and this is interesting. I think the relationships that I was speaking about when I put this together were the relationships that I fostered with my clients. And over the last, really the last year, the last 6-8 months, with the way the industry has been, and at some point later in the, you know, in our meeting today, we can talk about what my business has turned into. This became building relationships with other photographers, which is kind of cool. And honestly, one of the reasons I'm here today. It's so critical to build and maintain strong relationships with your clients, impart trust to them. And I found recently it's super important to have great relationships with the photography industry. You guys probably know that as well as I, if you're here and a member of the PPA. You know, we learn from each other, not just, you know, the artistry, but the business, you know. Mastering tools, I think we're going to get into that in a little bit. I'm talking about predominantly camera systems. And I guess we can talk for a minute. Maybe we can stop for a minute here, Susan, if we want to talk a little bit about the camera equipment that I use. And I think I may have an image coming up, and why, and how important it is to be artistic, but how important it is to be a good technical photographer. Not a great picture of the camera, but this is a shot of my camera shooting a resort a year or so ago. And I shoot with a medium format technical camera, and I've been shooting medium format since 2003. I've been shooting with a phase 1 system since 2003, and obviously have upgraded, I think, 7 times at this point, as the camera systems have become more and more sophisticated. I'm currently shooting with the phase 1 IQ4 150, and that's their latest and greatest digital back. And I certainly would encourage everybody to research phase 1 if you've never heard of them. But shooting with the IQ4 150 gives you a ton of really cool creative and technical advantages, and it's not just about megapixels. Incidentally, the megapixel count on this new system is 150. And 150 megapixels is a crazy number. I realize that. And it isn't just about the megapixels. It certainly is, to some degree, about the megapixels and the advantages that they give you. But in terms of making big prints, in terms of making the ability to zoom in further and further and further and get new compositions and new croppings. And I know if you guys are shooting landscape or fine art, if you're shooting a landscape and you've got 150 megapixels, it offers you a ton of cropping and zooming and recropping and rezooming, horizontal, vertical, square, with, I don't want to say with zero compromises, but with very few compromises. And in addition to the file size and the clarity, we don't need to get too deep into it right now, but if you guys had any other questions, the phase 1 has a couple of really fun features that are brilliant for landscape. And just for 1 second, I'll mention what they're called. One is called frame averaging, and one is called dual exposure plus. Dual exposure plus is a simpler description, and I'll tell you what that is. Dual exposure plus essentially shoots 2 exposures nearly simultaneously. It is a fraction of a millisecond difference. And one of those exposures is 3 stops brighter than the other. The yield is still one raw file, but it's one raw file that has all of that beautiful data plus 3 stops. So that is a fantastic advantage. And so how I've used that in my work is I'm basically shooting for an interior shot. I'm shooting that darker exposure, knowing that I've got 3 stops brighter buried and embedded in that pixel data. And if I wanted to open up the shadows, if I wanted to push the exposure here or there, I'm not boosting noise. I'm tapping into clean, sharp image data. Huge advantage. Okay, that's dual exposure plus. And by the way, that yields up, don't quote me on this, I believe it's 18 stops of dynamic range, which is shocking. The other thing that's cool, the frame averaging, is equally important in my work, and maybe even more important for landscape shooters, because I use it a lot for my exteriors. There are 3 components in what makes a good exposure, what makes an exposure. The aperture of our lens, the shutter speed of our lens, whether it's a digital shutter or a mechanical shutter or an electronic shutter, and the ISO sensitivity of our sensor, in this case, or film. Let's say, nobody's shooting film anymore for the most part. Let's just say the ISO sensitivity of our sensor. So those 3 components determine what your exposure is, okay? Aperture, shutter speed, which is time, fraction of a second, it's time, and sensitivity. What frame averaging does is it takes the time out of the equation as it pertains to exposure. And it does so in a very interesting way. What it allows you to do is shoot a series of exposures over time at a fixed shutter speed and create one raw file from them that can have a certain technical or aesthetic quality to it. Now, let me explain that a little better than I just did. Here's the real nuts and bolts of it. Let's say you're shooting a daytime exterior that is f11, 60th of a second, ISO 100. That should make sense to all of us. Okay, that's a basic exposure. Okay, with frame averaging, I can tell my digital back, I can tell the phase 1, okay, a 60th of a second, that's fine, but I want this to be a 3-minute exposure. Now, historically, what does that mean? Well, you need to put a neutral density filter on your lens, a big stopper with whatever neutral density and you may have to darken up that light, to reduce the amount of light passing through your lens. And that'll enable you to shoot a long exposure. Why do you want to shoot a long exposure? Well, because you can make the clouds move, You can make water get smooth and creamy. I mean, it's a pretty cool thing. I'm not sure how many of you guys have done long exposures in your landscape work, but it's pretty marvelous. And long exposure can be an eighth of a second. You know, if you've ever shot waterfalls or water movements, you know, at the shoreline, an eighth of a second or a quarter of a second, whatever, is enough to make that water feel mystical and dreamy and smooth and really give you a cool dramatic effect. Okay, the frame averaging essentially lets you decide what amount of time the camera is going to be exposing for. And so how do you do it? You don't filter on your lens. You tell the digital back, make this a 3-minute exposure. And so the camera does the math, and forgive me if I'm going to be a little off here. Instead of shooting one frame at a 60th of a second for a given exposure, it might shoot 300, 400, 500 frames over that 2-3 minute time period, whatever we ask for. And then the phase one digital back takes all of those hundreds of frames, combines them into an average of one raw file. And it is a shocking result that looks incredible. Not only can you use it for creative purposes like that, but there are some other technical reasons why we love frame averaging, not the least of which is noise becomes virtually gone, because noise is really comprised of shadow areas in our image where we've pushed it and then the sensor is not giving us good clean data. But when you're shooting 20 or 30 of those frames, you don't need to shoot hundreds, let's just say 20. The digital back is basically filtering out the noise. And so if you shoot one image, okay, one raw file comprised of 20, okay, in a frame average exposure, you can basically push it so much further than you would have with a regular exposure. Big deal, big advantage. It's not just about the megapixels. So I think I've gone on and on and on. If we want to talk about this a little bit more, we can, but we'll come back to that. And shooting technical also applies to being precise. And so these are some screen grabs from a not so recent shoot, but a relatively recent shoot, and how I use Capture One, which is what I tether my camera to be very precise when composing, making sure my lines are straight, making sure everything is lined up just so. And so let me back up one click. Here's my ambient exposure. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, this is a 1 second exposure, okay? The 1 second at an f11 at an ISO 100, whatever. Let's to put that out there. This shot has been carefully composed, and it looks pretty cool. This is available light. I set the camera there. Trust me, it took me 20 or 30 variations to get that orchid to lay this where I wanted, to make sure the books in the foreground were just how I wanted them, etc. and so forth. With all due respect to the umbrella and the reflection of the mirror, we're going to forget about that. This has been a carefully composed image, and it looks pretty cool. But the way I like to work, and I'm going to get into the demo, I promise, is I want to light the images myself. Not only can I control the color better, but I can control light quality better. I can control contrast better. I can control the storytelling. And so I'm moving my lighting around the frame. And by the way, this was the end result of those images put together. I'm able to create that vibe. And yes, I put the Casablanca. If you notice in the original, by the way, Casablanca was playing on the television when we were shooting this. So just to stay true to form, I did drop that in. And, you know, I chose that frame from Casablanca for, you know, a reason. And, you know, the angularity of that line, to me, works with the angularity of the books in the foreground. It works with the angular vibe of the orchid, how it's going from top left to bottom right. You see a little bit of that in the lighting, how it's going across the floor underneath the chair. These are all things that are important to me when I'm composing. Excuse me, I'm gonna take a sip of water. You guys have any questions?
Ask your questions. That's actually pretty cool.
So real quick, how are we doing on time, by the way, Susan? Let me look.
I got you
Okay, we got
almost at
tons.
the hour of 11, so we're still doing
We got
good.
tons of time.
We got tons of
We got
time.
tons of time. Okay, so like I mentioned, I do a lot of these workshops, and I want to show you a few behind the scenes. And listen, this is part of my life. This is part of my career these days. It's not just about me shooting for myself. It's, you know, being part of this community of photographers. And so this is kind of a few behind the scenes looks of us working at a couple of our workshops. And so there's the phase one camera system. You notice that I am tethered to my MacBook Pro. For the most part, I'm tethered on every shot. I'm certainly tethered on every interior. Why wouldn't I be? If I'm shooting outside and I'm rushing and I need to grab my images and I'm on the side of a mountain, maybe like some of you guys may be, or if I'm on the rooftop of a building shooting another building, I don't have to shoot to a laptop. Of course, I can shoot to the digital back itself. But isn't it nice to have it there, to see it bigger, to see how it's, you know, how the images are really coming up. If you look carefully here, now this is an older picture. Life has changed a little bit here. This is my previous digital back. This is the IQ3 100. And I had a few more cables back then. The newer system is minus a few cables, but you see on top of the camera, I have a ProPhoto transmitter, and it is communicating with my ProPhoto lights wirelessly. And then the ProPhoto transmitter, yes, it still needs to be plugged into the digital back, bit of a pain. And the digital back is plugged in, you see the blue cable, to the computer. I'm gonna get to another photograph that shows the IQ, the phase one camera system and their medium format camera, which is a lot more point and shoot and a lot more simple. One of the cool things about doing these workshops is I have in the past partnered with a couple of really great companies. One is called Capture Integration. They're out of Atlanta. But they sell all this amazing camera equipment around the country. Not just phase one, you guys. They sell Canon, they sell Leica, they sell Panasonic, they sell everything. But they basically were my, you know, sponsor, and they basically put these workshops together. And also phase one. I'm very proud that phase one provided like 4 or 5 camera systems. So it's not just about me shooting and people standing around. It's about people getting hands-on shooting with the cameras, and it was pretty cool stuff.
There's a question real quick. What's the name of the sponsor? Did I get that right, Jen?
Capture Integration, and of course, phase one. Capture Integration are a camera reseller. They sell lights, they sell tripods, they sell everything. I do not work for them, but they have been predominantly, I mean, we talked about building relationships, right, you guys? They've been great to me. And I mean, I will say this, right? My very, 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 very first shoot, let me back up a minute. My phase one cameras have never broken down, you know, not worked in 17 years until this one day, which was my very first shoot after the shutdown. I forget the exact date, we're going back a few months. The shoot was on Friday, and I hadn't touched my cameras, you guys, in months. Okay, that Thursday, I was like, okay, let's charge my batteries because I'm shooting tomorrow. I charged my batteries, got everything going, and the phase one would not turn on. I still don't know what happened, but I reached out to Capture Integration, and 7:45 a.m. the following morning, they FedExed me a camera that I was able to take with me on that photo shoot. Of course, I then sent my camera back to them. They fixed it. I got my camera back. But that's what's cool about having relationships. It's not, you know, sometimes it's not about the equipment. It's about the advice and who you're buying the equipment from. And when you're spending this much money, you want to have that, you know, great people kind of supporting you. These are some images from our Vegas workshop. And there's going to be a close-up of the camera coming. Okay, so that's the XF medium format camera system. So that digital back goes onto the back of a camera, just like a point and shoot, like a Hasselblad would be, or a Mamiya. And you can go click and just point and shoot. And it's awesome. I love point and shoot. And there's another one in the background. You see me standing kind of funny. There's another XF camera system. Great camera system. Point and shoot. Done. It's really easy. A lot of advantages to shooting with that camera over the tech camera, honestly. But, I like the precision of a technical camera for my work. And this is more stuff from the Vegas workshop. Okay. And we're about to get to the end of the slideshow. I have pretty good inkling that we're about to get to the end of the slideshow. And that's going to lead us to a demo, I hope.
And we hope to have Barry out here next year when COVID gets better.
That would be awesome. I was supposed to have a workshop this year in May, and this would have been my third one that I did with these guys. And of course it was, postponed. And that's really what kind of had me rethink how the heck, what am I going to do for the next handful of months? And I had a bunch of my workshop people say, have you considered doing something online? And the answer was no. I don't want to do anything online. But that attitude quickly changed. And, it became, a form of sanity for me, a form of inspiration, a way for me to be kind of, what's the word, on top of my game, and keep my skill set sharp, to do these one-on-one consultations, group webinars, many of which were very, very overwhelmingly attended. I freaked out a little bit at first, but it was really cool to kind of continue on this path of sharing, even when we couldn't do it out in the field. But the idea of doing something in Colorado would be amazing. And I actually have a client that is a national builder that I'm 99% sure they have some product out in Colorado for me to get to shoot. That would be really, really fun for me to be able to share in real life. So with this, I'm going to come out of here. I want to do some demonstration. Let me get out of this a minute.
While he gets that set up, does anybody have questions?
Yeah, does anybody have questions? And actually, I wanted to ask your guys' permission, only because we're halfway through. Can we take like 2 minutes so I can get I've been yapping. I can make a 2-minute water break and come right back. Is that cool?
Go right ahead, Barry. Go right ahead.
I'm sure people might want to, is that okay? But nope, I'll answer questions first. Or people are walking away? Okay. Why don't we take 3 minutes, and I'll come back at 1, and we'll because this part of the program is actually really, really important. And I think people are going to get a lot out of it. So why don't we take a couple minutes, and I'll be right back. And I'm going to figure out how to do this. Okay, guys, see you in a minute.
Okay. So I know that most of you guys have walked away. If you're still, oh wow, you all really, really walked away.
I told you, people need their drink, they need their bathroom break. So
we did. Wow.
Yeah. Well, one of the webinars that I did, and you'll forgive me while I fill up my water glass, one of the webinars that I did was 3.5 hours. And after about 2.5 hours, and there were 175 people there, 165 were still there after the first 2.5 hours. And I said to my guy, I said, listen, I need to use the restroom. Can we take a quick restroom break? So
Okay, so as everybody's coming back before Barry gets sit down, I put some links in our chat. We're doing a survey and we would love our PPC members to fill that out. We're just asking some general questions for 2021. And if you're interested in doing a holiday party, we want to kind of gauge to see where you guys at of doing it in person or doing virtually online. We also want to do a PPC member update. Some of you notice we're doing we're doing mobile texting. And we don't have everybody's phone number or email up to date, so we want you guys to update that. And then last, quickly before we get Barry back on, we are definitely we are going to be doing our turnover of our board. Our wonderful Jennifer, who's been doing events, is going to be stepping down to do some committee work for us. She's not leaving us. She's just going to sideline a little bit. She has some activities going on. We are definitely looking for some new help, not only in events, but just other committees like doing this amazing conference. So if you're interested on serving on the board, let Gina and I know over the weekend and we'll give you more details. So that is, Barry, if you're back, we're ready.
Yes, ma'am. I am back. I am back. You guys still see my screen, right?
Yep.
Okay. So I promised you guys some demos. This is the fun part. So I ended the keynote, or at least that portion of the keynote, here in Las Vegas at our Las Vegas workshop. And this image has really become one of my favorites. I consider it to be one of my signature images in my portfolio. It certainly is one of the signature images from our last workshop. And I want to share with you how we did it. And I'm going to jump into Photoshop here. Let me hide my pictures. Okay. Now, here's where we, for sure, you guys, if you have any questions, please either type them so Susan can see them, or because I'm not sure the level of proficiency that we, this group has in Photoshop, whether you work in Photoshop at all, but so let's, if we need to stop and pause, if I'm going too quickly, or if I say something that makes no sense, by all means, please ask. But I'll start from the beginning. These are the, let's see, about 8 or 10 layers that are going to make up this picture. I'm not going to walk you through what got me to this point to arrive at this image, but suffice to say, the camera just didn't show up here, okay? The camera was moved forward, it was pulled back, it was panned right, chairs were moved in, chaise lounges were in the background here. Can you see my cursor move, by the way?
Yes.
Okay, so we had chaise lounges back here. I mean, this is all put together probably over the course of, not that much time, honestly, because, the sun was setting, maybe 30 minutes. And remember, this image was being built and shot during our workshop. And we had about 15 photographers, kind of 5 camera crews kind of working at once, with me kind of being in charge of this one, but also kind of making my rounds to other people while they were shooting and sticking my 2 cents in. So just for the purposes of our presentation, I want to show you each of these layers one by one and how I put them together. Okay, and then I'll explain to you why I organize them this way. So here we are in Photoshop, and I've output 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, if I counted that correctly, layers. And I'm going to isolate this one, okay, and I'm option clicking on the layer visibility to show it. And this is just an ambient frame. This is near the end. This is probably the last one I took that really captured the mood I was looking for. This is all available lighting. I don't want to use natural versus artificial, remember, okay? This is the available light that was there, from these designer pendants to the fireplace, to reflected light around the room, to the little bit of lighting that's happening, in the background here. So let's take a look at this next layer. And this is actually going to be kind of fun for us. I apologize for that. Okay, here's the next layer. And this is probably one of the first layers that I did. I like to illuminate the interior of, well, let me rephrase that. I like to, I want to feel like my lighting is emanating from the center of the picture as a general kind of aesthetic choice that I make on almost every picture. Now, of course, that's going to be predicated upon the lighting in the scene. So for example, if I take a look at this, okay, I'm looking at the available, you know, again, I'll use the word natural light that's there. And I'm saying to myself, okay, how can I enhance this? How can I make it feel this that much more kind of amped up and dramatic, theatrical, but still to some degree, I'll use the word again, natural. And I'm looking, okay, at these pendants above me, and those pendants above me could be shooting down and creating this light. Okay, I'm going to show you how I put this together. Now, this lighting is balanced for the strobe. Okay, this is 5,000 degrees Kelvin for those of you who really want to get technical. And that is giving me pretty color accurate color rendition on these chairs. And it's also giving me that direction of the light, which is so critical to me in my work, okay, from above. Let's take a look at the next one. Same idea. If you look at what's happening here, look at the wall back there. It feels pretty natural. Again, I'm going to use that word, but that wall really gets kind of mushy. And as beautiful as it looks with the available lighting, I want to enhance my architect or my designer's design elements. And so if you look at that wall back, I'm now bringing out texture in the wall that's there. I'm bringing out color accuracy because look at how nice and clean and gray that feels. And that doesn't mean you have to shoot everything dead on, spot on, neutral, but it's nice to know you got a frame where it's captured, okay? So let's continue. I'm gonna go through these quickly so you have a sense of all of my lighting frames. Then we've decided to bring, look at this one, this is the first one, lighting the back wall, lighting the front wall. You know, it's, you wanna be efficient with your lighting. I tend to be. Now, again, this was done within a learning environment. This was done at a workshop. So it's not like I could spend 2 hours really get going crazy. And I typically don't. I will typically light a space like this pretty efficiently. Forgive the sloppy nature of that. These are not my light modifier. This is generally a no-no for me. But with respect to that, it is still giving us nice clean light here on the wall. Let's continue to the next one. And I, by the way, I'm shift clicking on these masks, and then I'm option clicking on the visibility icon, the little eyeball here, that basically solos this layer, just so you can see what that layer is, okay? So this is backlighting the sofa. You know, it's giving me some pretty cool stuff here. And if you look at that versus this, look at the difference. This is kind of a mush. The color's wrong. There's no presence to the lighting, truthfully, versus this. This is giving me nice, crisp delineation of these of the fabric. It's also showcasing some fingerprints, which we're going to have to deal with. But you know, this is one of the advantages of having that digital darkroom. But it's nice to have the detail there. Okay, let's continue on our trip here. Let's take a look at the next one. Now I'm backlighting the sofa. So do I need 3 lights to hit the sofa? Probably not, but it's, you know, it's nice to have, and it took us an extra 30 seconds to grab. Okay, let's continue. I'm right clicking on all of these. Now we're hitting the front. This is a nice, clean, a little flat, admittedly, light layer that we're going to use. Okay, let's move on. And by the way, I'm going to talk to you about these blend modes in Photoshop. All of these layers have different blend mode possibilities. And again, I'm not sure how technical you guys are with Photoshop layering, but I do not admittedly use all of them. On occasion, I will explore all of them if I feel like I need to tap into one of the effects that these things have. For the most part, I'm using normal. For the most part, I'm using lighten, and I'm going to be demonstrating these, color, and luminosity. Those are the bread and butter of what I do. Normal, lighten, occasionally darken, but normal, lighten, color, and luminosity. And I can explain how they differentiate as I'm going through the demo. Okay, let's take a look at this one. Something else that we wanted to try to kind of do, which is kind of fun. Let me go back to the ambient. You know, again, I'm trying to identify potential for lighting. Just to throw lights around haphazardly is not going to yield the right result. And it's going to also make life a little bit more painful than it has to be. I like to be strategic. And so when I looked at this natural light look, this is a light source to me. Why not have some fun? Why not fake it a little? And if you take a look at the lighting on this chair, for example, you don't feel any light source there, do you? It's just kind of this generic light. You know, you have kind of not so attractive shadows on the floor. You don't feel that firelight. You're going to feel it here. And so I am going to layer in my own firelight with this technique, and we're going to get to it. Let's continue. Let's look at what the sofa warms. Okay, so since I'm bringing the fire to the chairs, I wanted to bring the fire to the sofa as well. And so we'll play with the idea of putting some warm color. And if you look at that one compared to, which one was it? This one. Look at how gray and spot on that is compared to that, which is going to hopefully give us a bit of that warm fire kind of vibe. Okay. And then lastly, let's take a look at these other ambient frames. Oh, I must have it at a reduced opacity. So if you look at this ambient final, this was near the end of the night, the end of the shoot. This one was the first one we shot. And there are some beautiful things in here. And when I'm shooting an image, an interior or exterior image, if I feel like I want to have a progression of images in the bank, so to speak, just so I can tap into them in case I need it. Maybe I decide, you know what, this is beautiful and I want to go with that look. Ultimately, though, I decided I wanted to go with this look. So everything we're going to do tonight or this afternoon or morning is in an effort to make this look as amazing as possible. But I also have this in my back pocket if I wanted it, okay? Let's take a look at this last one. I also have one more ambient. Well, it's probably somewhere in the middle between these two. You know, this one was a little bit darker, this one was a little bit lighter, and so forth. Let me ask you guys a question. Does anybody who shoots exteriors or shoots interiors or whatever your subject matter may be, excuse me, shoot with a locked off camera like I am and shoot a series of images as the sun's setting or as the sun's rising, just so you can really see how the image changes? Does anybody do that in their work? Because certainly for landscape photography, you know, if you're shooting something at noon, just to make it a very blank statement, it's going to feel a heck of a lot different than at 5 minutes before sunset or 5 minutes before sunrise. You know, that's a very big dichotomy in terms of how things look. But for me, when I'm shooting a twilight image, I typically would like to start 30, 40 minutes early and maybe end 15, 20 minutes late. Let's just say I have an hour and I shoot a succession of images with a natural light. And here I am, I picked out my 3 favorites, one early, okay, one late, and then one in the middle. And interspersed throughout these natural light shots is when I shot all my lighting layers. So let's cut to the chase. Let's see how we put this together. So I'm shift clicking on these masks. And by the way, of course, I dragged all of this into Photoshop and named these. I'm not sure if you guys know how to do that, but you can, of course, export as layers out of Lightroom, okay? And I'm not gonna go in there and show you that, but Lightroom will allow you to export as layers directly into Photoshop, and those layers will come in, boom, 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 one on top of the other, just like that. And then you can take the time to go ahead and name them, you know, glow, whatever. And that's typically what I do. When you're exporting out of Capture One, which is basically the phase 1 version of Lightroom, you have to save out those files and then go to Photoshop and import them. And I can show you basically how I do it. I go to scripts, load files into stack, I browse, I find my images, whatever, and then ask Photoshop to import them. And they come in just like that. And then I can live with the names or I can rename them, okay? Then I'm gonna delete this layer mask a minute. I then come down, I hold the Option key and click here and add layer mask. When I hold the Option key down, it puts a black mask over that layer. The black mask is an opaque mask, okay? If I put a white mask over it and I can click on the mask and hit Command I on a Mac, which inverts it, that turns it into a white mask. So I can go black or white, and basically I'm essentially making this mask transparent or opaque. But I like to work opaque, and then I grab a brush, okay, and I'm gonna grab a 100% white brush. And if I grab my brush and I paint, and I can turn up my opacity to 100 and my flow to 100 real quick, I'm now painting in what's in this layer. You see how it's turning white right there in the middle? So it's revealing the layer. Let's start over. I'm gonna hit delete layer mask. Let's go back to the beginning. I'm gonna put the layer mask back. So that hide and reveal is really at the core of my technique. Does anybody have any questions about this? Because I'm about to jump into it. Does anybody have a question about layering or masking? Or do you guys get it? If you don't ask a question, I'm assuming you get it.
Lots of thumbs up. We're doing good.
All right, cool. Well, then let's jump into my technique. And you'll notice, by the way, I'm clicking on chair center. We've already seen that. I'm not going to arduously start to reveal all these one by one. I already spent the time to do it. But if I just click on it, you notice this is in lighten mode. The reason I have it in lighten mode, and I'm going to shift click. When I shift click and it turns into an X, okay, that basically means it's like deleting temporarily that mask. Look at it in lighten mode versus normal. Normal shows you the layer. When I have it in lighten mode, what it's doing is it's showing lighter pixels than what's underneath it. And this is the key to this particular technique for this particular kind of shot. When I have a dark shot that I want to add light to, I'm typically adding my light layers in lighten mode. And so when I hide that, what that enables me to do, and I'll show the whole picture. I grab my brush. I like to work at 100% opacity with maybe a slower flow. I normally work out like a flow of 2 or 4, but since we don't want to be here all day, let's just put it at 10%. Okay, and as I click and paint and I'm kind of moving around, you see what it's doing? I'm being a little bit messy at the moment. It's revealing, and you see it right here. You see the white little dot. It's revealing what's underneath it. Okay, let's undo that. So my goal here, and I like to go shift click. Oops, I like to shift click just to see what the thing is doing. What's it doing? What's good about it? What can I take from it? I grab my brush. There are some cool things right here on these chairs. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to grab my brush, and I'm going to start just by hitting the tops of the chairs. And there's no rule that says I need to blast these chairs with that entire light up there. This is where the artistry comes in. This is where the fun comes in. And this is what makes how you do this different than how I do it. And I've actually sent out some files to other photographers, sent out some of my work and said, hey, okay, now you understand how I do this. You go ahead and do it. I want to see what you come up with. So I'm just kind of painting and revealing. And it's hard to say when we love it and when we hate it, but let's just say for the time being, we love this. One of the reasons this is working is because I have it in lighten mode, and because the shutter speed of this particular exposure is significantly faster than the shutter speed of this one. And why is that important? It basically means that what I'm lighting with my light, okay, what I'm lighting with my umbrella is where the light is happening. So if I start painting over here, where the umbrella is not hitting, nothing's really revealed, right? Nothing's really revealing here because the umbrella is not lighting it. And that's why you want to shoot your light layers, your strobe layers, with a faster shutter speed. Let's just have a little bit more fun. Let's paint in here a little bit more carefully. And I'm painting in here. So you see I'm lighting up the sculpture, even though the light stand is right there. Pretty cool. All right, you guys get the idea. Let's move on to our next layer. Now, one last thing that's kind of neat is because this is on a layer, remember I had the other one reduced, I can reduce it to 0, to 50, to 43. For the time being, let's leave it at 100. Even though something tells me, having messed with this before, we're going to end up pulling this down because I wanted a little bit of that natural light look to come back, right? But let's hold off on that. Let's take a look at the next one, the back wall. Again, let's see it's in lighten mode. I'm going to shift click on the mask, which basically makes the mask invisible for the minute. And if I put this on normal, let's just take a look at what this layer, let's remind ourselves what that layer actually was. And you see there's no illumination here really to speak of that we should be that worried about. It's basically lighting this. And of course, as well, sorry about that. And as well, if you take a look at the ambient frame, that sky is brighter than the sky here. Okay, why is that important? Because when I put this in lighten mode, you see the sky isn't changing. Okay, if I hide it, the only thing that's changing is that wall. Okay, and a couple of, stray light up here that's ugly that we're not gonna want. So let's grab our brush. Let's get the brush big enough to where it's kind of gonna fit that area. And I'm just kind of tapping. And again, I can be here tapping, and it's not gonna light until I hit where the umbrella is, okay? So that's kind of cool, right? Let's also hit down in here. You notice it's hitting that marble. And again, you can be as artistic as you wanna be with this, you guys. But let's just say for the time being, we love that just the way it is. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. Same thing, it's in lighten mode. We're gonna shift click on it. Now you see it's also hitting that chair. I don't want that. I don't wanna hit that chair. I wanna hit the wall. So I'm gonna get a bigger brush. It kind of fills that space. And I can choose to keep, I can keep blasting, painting, and go until it's overlit. Okay, we don't want to do that. We want to be sensitive to what looks good to us. And this is where you can be artistic. What's making this work, again, is the technical part of it, which is that shutter speed differentiation, number one. What's also making it work, for me at least, is the direction of the light. It feels like it's illuminated from the inside of the room. Okay, so let's just say for the sake of argument, we like this, it looks good. We'll come down, we'll kiss a little bit of the marble, just like in the other one. Okay, for a little organization, I'm gonna select both of these and hit Command G. That groups them, okay? Inside that folder is a group of however many layers I want, and I'm just gonna call this wall. Boom. What can I do now? I can shut both of them off at the same time. I can choose to reduce the opacity of both of them at the same time. Pretty cool. Let's put it back to 100. I can go ahead and put an adjustment layer on both of them at the same time. What's an adjustment layer? Let me show you a simple one. Let's say brightness and contrast. Let's go back to our layers. Here's a brightness and contrast layer. And right now it's sitting there in the layer stack. Excuse me. If I click Option, you see that little clip, and I click it, that means this is going to affect that layer or that group of layers. So if I go to this and I'm like, you know what, that wasn't bright enough, let's make it brighter. You notice it's only hitting, and if I go too bright, it's actually leaking into the sky, which we don't want. But we don't want to do any of that. I just wanted to show you that one of the cool things about putting something together in a group is you can assign adjustment layers to that group. And I do this a lot, you guys. Let me take a drink of water, excuse me. Any questions?
How long does it take you to edit a photo or like an event like this?
I'm pretty efficient. My goal is to spend more time shooting than editing, always. But that's just me. Depends on the shoot, depends on the client. But a shoot like this, figure an hour per picture to shoot it, and hopefully less than an hour to edit it. Okay. For a high-end client like this one, I need to spend time. Yeah, an hour and an hour on average. Let's continue because I want to show you guys other pictures. So let's continue down this road. Oops. So same thing here, light mode on the sofa, and I'm going to be pretty rough with it. I mean, I'm being, dare I say, sloppy, but because the shutter speed that I keep harping on, I'm able to lighten up the sofa, and it's really not causing any problems anywhere else. I'm not having to select the sofa. I'm not going through any of that pain and suffering. Let's do the back. Let me shift click on it. See what it's doing? It's just highlighting the top of the sofa, and it's giving me cleaner light. Admittedly, it's whiter. We can control that, but I don't mind throwing around some color accuracy if I need to, just to kind of clean up that gray a little. See, I'm hitting it here. Admittedly, this is going to have to be retouched, you guys, but let's not spend too much time on that. Let's take a look at these sofa pillows. Oh, this is interesting. This is interesting. This is a good lesson here. You notice that these first couple of layers were all in light mode because I was taking something darker and adding light to it. I have this one in color blend mode. Why? Because this, if you take a look at, let me put it in normal a minute. And let me shift click, excuse me, let me option click on the eyeball. Okay, that's just to remind us what this layer was. Basically, it's a big umbrella smacking the front of the sofa. It's not a pretty light, okay? Admittedly, it's a little overlit. Maybe we could use it. But, and I thought, you know what? Let's use it just for its color properties. And here's where I want you guys to get your heads wrapped around that these layers are comprised of luminosity and color information, luminosity being the lights and the darks, and the color being the obvious, the hue and the chroma. So I can put this in color mode, okay? And what it's doing is, if I shift click, it's basically just throwing the color from this layer across the whole image. Obviously, it's messing up all this other stuff because there's no luminosity there. But look what it's doing. If I felt like, hey, you know what, Barry, there's a little bit of color cast here. That sofa should be grayer, and those greens aren't popping that great. I can get my color and paint in, which is what I'm doing here, a better green, a more accurate green. And this isn't necessarily something that makes it a better picture, you guys, but this is just a demonstration of that when you're working in this technique, take advantage of Photoshop's blend modes. And look at that, I just painted in some spot on color. Look at the difference. Before, can you see the red kind of color differentiation here? You can see it in the shadows versus this. It just made the grays gray. I mean, everything is spot on. Is it making the picture better? No, but this is a demonstration I want to show you. And then let's move on. The chair warm, this is interesting. Look at how beautiful the chairs get when I light them. Okay. And I'm gonna put them in lighten mode. And I'm just putting some fire on those chairs. I'm actually throwing it across the floor a little as well. It's even hitting the sculpture a little. Now here's when if you remember, I said, maybe we're gonna have to reduce the opacity of the chair light. Now I see why. Is because the chair light really is overpowering my firelight look, isn't it? Well, let's not go to 0 on the chairs. Let's just go down to what I think I had it at before, maybe 70%, something like that. Okay, let's get back to this chair one, because I actually think there's more pretty stuff there. It's actually hitting the inside of the chair too, right? Let's zoom in a little. Get the brush the right size. And it's giving me a nice shape to those chairs. It's kissing a little bit here. This is, you can do this all day, but you guys get the idea. So much creative possibility when you're working in this technique. I even wanted to throw some of that fire onto the sofa. You don't have to, but admittedly, the front of those pillows are a little kind of dank and dark. And I know I spent time making them neutral, but you know what, that's okay. We're gonna add a little bit of that fire vibe here, just to add some warmth. And I'm being quick. You guys get the idea though. Okay, let's take a look at this ambient early frame. What are advantages here? This is a very great tip I'm gonna give you guys. I take a look at this image and I feel like, it's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. But these lights are getting a little bit blown out, okay, admittedly. They were also moving, by the way. Those are hanging from electrical cords. They were moving and spinning with the whole back of the house wide open. You can imagine the nightmare that was. But I managed to get them hanging pretty well. But check this out. If I wanted to, and I'm leaving this in normal mode, paint in very carefully in here, I can add some detail. And you see this one spun a little. I can add in a little detail back into these lights. Do you see what I did? Well, that's crazy. Let me undo that. And let me show you a way cooler way of doing this. And I'm not sure if anybody here uses layer properties. And I'm going to teach you, and again, this is pretty advanced, but I'm going to teach you layer properties. Okay, let me get a big old brush. And I'm just going to paint that layer in, which is the ambient early layer. Okay. And you see what it's doing. I'm painting, painting, painting. It's darkening up those pendants. It's also darkening up some other areas that maybe we don't want to. It's darkening up the darks, which maybe we don't want to. Or what we want to do is just darken up. I probably could do some of it over here too as well, but darken that up a little bit. Okay, you guys get the idea. But let me show you something that's kind of cool. This is before, after. But it really did darken up everything up there. We don't want that. And it also hit the wall. Let me show you layer, I call it layer properties, actually called layer styles, forgive me. If you double click, let me go back to if you double click right here in the layer, it opens up this layer style dialog. This is the blend if sliders. Now it's gonna blend this in if I have values from 0 to 255, 0 being the darkest areas of the picture, 255 being the lightest areas of the picture. Watch what happens when I bring this down. You see what's happening? So that darkened, this layer, which has darker information, as I drag it to the left, it's basically disappearing. Pretty cool, right? So our goal here is to try to find the right blend. Let's do it the other way, just to show you what it looks like. Here I'm getting rid of all the dark information and you see it almost got perfect. So we don't want this layer to be blended in for any of these dark values. Let's just go back to the beginning. Those are the dark values. As I drag these dark values to the right, those layers, the blend if, it's blend if it's a value above 91. Now, admittedly, this could be dangerous and this could get very posterized feeling and ugly, but let me show you something that's pretty cool. I can option click and then split this. And that being able to split this like that lets you blend it a little bit softer. Okay, I click OK, I back up. So now what I've effectively done, before, after, before, after, it's almost perfect. It's just giving me the darker information, okay, in this luminosity range from 255 to 147, but it's a little bit gradated from 147 to 194. I use this blend diff sometimes, not every time, but it's kind of cool to do that on something like this. Okay, last one, this is the glow and light mode. Let's just see why I even need this. You know, there's some natural light going on here. If I click on it, and if I wanted to add more glow to this dark city, for example, and because it's in lighten mode, it's not killing the lights that are there. Okay, it's just adding to it. Pretty cool, huh? So you guys get the idea. That's a basic rundown of how I would do this image. And then of course, lastly, I would do retouching. I'd have a retouch layer. I mean, this is not perfect. We're close, but this is not perfect. I would do a layer, call it retouch, for example. And here is where I would go in and do my cloning and my retouching and that kind of thing. Always do your retouching on a layer, you guys. So if you make a mistake, you can go back, you can shut it off, you can turn it on. And trust me, I'm taking out stuff that I don't like across the board. And if that stuff I don't like is a fingerprint, I'm taking it out. Are there any questions about this picture before we move on to the next one? Because I do have another picture I'd love to share with you.
Any questions? That was awesome.
You guys
We
like
just
that?
learned about luminosity from Larry a couple of weeks ago.
Awesome. Yeah, let's jump into another one because we are getting late. I have this picture, which is kind of a modern, you know, Miami Beach thing. I have this one, which is darker. Let's go with the lighter one. I know we're running out of time. And then I have this one. But there's your humble photographer having some fun. This is what from that New York shoot. So I tell you what, because we are running out of time, we may only have time to do one more picture. Why don't you take a vote, Susan, between I'm going to recommend this one or the one I call Candy Cane because of the bright colors. Which one do you guys want me to do? This
Put
one
or two in chat real quick.
Okay, so let's say this is one. The Candy Cane is one.
Candy cane is 1.
And
New
then
York is 2.
New York is 2.
Well, we're tied right now.
Oh,
here we go.
geez.
Still tied.
Well, I'll try to do both, but let me know which one you want me to
I think
start.
we can open up for questions, so let's definitely just do one more. The consensus is 1, so it was Candy.
Candy Cane? Okay.
Yeah.
We'll do some Candy Cane. And I'm not gonna start opening up every layer here, you guys, just so we can go through this more quickly. So here's my base layer, and I like to figure out what my base layer should be. And you'll notice this is completely different than the other one, but this base layer here, you notice I did not choose this. That's my ambient. I mean, that's a pretty damn good shot, right? If I was shooting for a real estate agent, done, moving on. Okay, it's pretty cool. But, you know, I'm a control freak and I want to control my image wherever I can. And I want to control my light and I want to control my look. So I decided to go with this one as my base layer because, you know, the quality of light outside is better. So let's just make this happen. I'm going to shift click on this and I'm doing all my additive stuff. So in the foreground, it's basically adding light to, let me get this bigger, to these chairs. Now I'm using a brush to do this for this demo, you guys. There are way more, and I actually, while I'm doing this, I'm going to talk a little bit about my webinars that I've done and my tutorials that I've done. I demonstrate in these tutorials a lot of other really cool ways to implement this kind of layered technique that I'm demoing here today. What I'm demoing here today is the basics. I go into it a little bit more depth in some of my other tutorials. And I break down some of these pictures and of course a whole host of other ones. Okay, so that's one. Let me right click on this. Okay, this one's pretty fun. This one's giving me some really pretty highlights. And the reason I'm shift clicking on and off is I want to see where's the good stuff. You know, I can't remember what I did in all these, you know, so let me shift click again. Is it hitting that? Yeah. So again, I'm not being sloppy. I'm not going in here because to me, that's just overlit on the column. Let me undo that. I'm just selectively grabbing what I think is working best for this particular image. If I need to zoom in a little, so I'm going to be a little more precise, I'll zoom in a little. Let me back out. There is a tendency though to start to get that overworked look. So be cautious when you're doing this. And this is why working with an airbrush all the time can be too much. And there are other ways to do it that I do demo in some of my other tutorials. Now I'm up to this one. I call this one right living. You notice it's in normal mode, and I could say why. Because that's how I got rid of my umbrella. At some point, this has got to go bye-bye. So I'm going to up my flow so it happens a little faster. Again, I'm so OCD, you guys, I'm working in like 4%, but you know, we don't want to sit around all day watching this stuff disappear and appear. When you're doing this, be very careful. And yes, I've made this mistake a bunch of times in the past. You have like 2% of something visible. Oh, you think that's finished. Well, guess what? The umbrella is still there, right? So you need to zoom in. I'm being, just for the purposes of our demo, a bit quick, okay? But when you do this, you're gonna take your time. Okay, let's see, right sofa up, I'm back into light mode again. And you can see why, because I'm taking that dark sofa and I'm just gonna kiss the top of it. Admittedly, at 34% might be a little abrupt, but you guys get the idea. Here's the left living. Let's see what's happening here. Now I'm moving my light forward. This is giving me some pretty cool stuff. And if you look carefully at this column, it's actually hitting the column nicely here. It's at a little bit more here. It's subtle. I'm not sure if it comes through on the webinar screen, but I'm getting more detail in the column. It's giving the column shape, which I like. Cool. You know what? Wait a minute. Let's take a look here, you guys. I might have made a mistake there. Let's try that one more time. Yeah, okay. I thought that was a mistake. My apologies. Susan, you'll edit that out. Okay. So I was accidentally not painting on the mask. I was accidentally painting on the layer. That's a boo-boo. You got to be careful for that. You don't want to make that mistake and then you're painting over your work. So I'm moving the light forward. And again, this is just in an effort to create a sense of three-dimensionality. It's a way to, well, let's just lower that 34%. You can see now why it's better to work with more subtlety. Just wrapping it around a little. And one light. You don't need to spend $1 million on a bunch of expensive lights. You just need to spend a decent amount of money on one good one. And you get beautiful results. Okay, you got the idea. We're almost finished. Now I want to show you how I layer in the ambient on top of it. Okay, this frame is actually doing some pretty cool stuff here as well. Why not? And it's it's backlighting this chair a little. It's backlighting this table base a little. And it's also, if you look carefully, look what it's doing to the flowers. Now, I don't want to blast those lilies, but I can go in with a little brush and just kiss the inside of the lilies like this. Why not? Be a little more precise with it. There's no rules.
I have a question for you while you're doing this.
Go ahead.
Do you like using an umbrella versus a softbox? Is that because you're
It's a great question.
or you like the spin of light better?
I like The ease of use of an umbrella. It's easy to click, open, stick it up there. But certainly a softbox has other advantages. You can hold a softbox on the end of a light in your hand and get shots. I own a lot of different modifiers. I own 2 different softboxes, 5 different umbrellas, snoots, reflectors. I bounce light. I won't say one is better than another, but I'll say the right modifier for the job is always the right way to go. And lastly, let's just take a look at this ambient layer. Now, when I shot this ambient layer, I shot it with a polarizing filter. And the reason I put the polarizing filter is I was getting some pretty over the top reflections all over. I mean, to the point where it was nightmare. And this table had a huge glare on it. That polarizing filter was amazing, but it also did some kind of weird things as well. It gave me this strange kind of rainbow vibe, because I think that, at least in South Florida, these windows are like polarized. So when you have the polarizer on top of the polarizer, you get some weird effects. But that's cool. I can still use my ambient up in here if I wanted. If I wanted to just very lightly go across here to control that. And that ambient is actually nice here because these balloons, which are very strange, I know, but very cool designer lighting. It's kind of softening this, and also this too. Let me get a bigger brush here. This is a little too reflective. Now look at my, it's ironic that my ambient frame is letting me reduce these reflections, but it's pretty cool. Let me shift click on it. Where is the ambient actually better than what I've done? You know, a couple of areas maybe. Maybe the ambient is a little better here. And I'm not painting in the ambient because this is a softer look. Now, there's clearly a lot of things that still need to be done. For example, we could not get this television to lay back as hard as we tried. So ultimately in Photoshop, I selected the TV, angled it back so it looked like it wasn't about to fall off the wall. I did end up controlling more of the reflections here. You know, all this little stuff has to come out. You guys don't want to watch me do retouching, but I'm pretty OCD about this kind of stuff. Now, if you're shooting for a realtor versus an interior design firm, you know, there is where there may be some, you know, some bridges you don't want to cross when it comes to retouching, because the whole issue of, you know, what's actually there is, you know, you don't want to lie about your subject matter. But when you're shooting for a designer and you're trying to, at least from my look, create an ideal, you don't need to see air conditioning vents on your portfolio. I don't want them in my portfolio. And most of the time, my interior designers don't want them in their portfolio. Are there any other questions about this? Because I wanted to get back to my keynote because there's a couple of other things I wanted to cover, and I wanted to also talk about business if people wanted to hear about the business and how you can make a living in this industry, you know, real estate versus architecture. But I wanted to make sure we covered all the Photoshop stuff before I left Photoshop.
Anybody got any questions? Thumbs up if you're good. Thumbs up, we're good.
You guys are good? You guys know everything? I'm just curious, how many, you know, give me a thumbs up or a count, how many people are using layers in their workflow? Obviously not the same as mine, but how many people use layers in any capacity?
Pretty much majority, everyone.
Everybody? Okay, cool. I didn't dive too deeply into adjustment layers inside of Photoshop today. I guess we didn't have too much time, but adjustment layers to me are key to my work because it's just a more local way to control your levels, your hue saturation, your curves. So I strongly advise you guys to really look into masking of your adjustment layers. Okay. And again, I guess I'll send you guys a link if anybody's interested in any of my tutorials where I really jump in a little bit more deeply to kind of some of the stuff that I do. I really would love to have you guys come take a look at that. So let me jump back over to the keynote and let's see where we were. Okay, I was going to talk about the business of architectural photography.
Hold on,
Um,
hold on, wait, Barry. We got a question. Ellen.
I'm
Go ahead.
sorry. I was slow in unmuting there so that I could ask this question. I apologize. So in
No
your
worries.
last image, you were introducing light from on the left wall, coming all the way down from
Mhm.
back to front. But there isn't, but I would have thought that you would want to introduce light from the window side, or why did you choose to go
Yeah, that's a
from
that's
a
a great
non-light
that's a
source?
great question.
Very good
That's a great
question.
question. I think first of all, you're right. And I do typically look at my light sources for, I'll use the M word, motivation, for where I'm doing my light placement. There may be one, let me see, there may be one or two layers here that, for example, I didn't spend too much time. I maybe should have been a little more careful bringing this layer in, for example, across the table that is showing a little bit of a sense of, you see that was from this light over here with the umbrella on the right-hand side, on the window side. This is implying a little bit more right to left. You know, in this particular case, because we have a big window here and we have windows on the right, you know, that's my way of rationalizing to myself, well, maybe I could have lit from the left side too. I mean, this highlight on the left, okay, and let's just take a look at the natural one. Oops, it's here, excuse me. That's the natural light. So anything that looks kind of like that, I feel like I can take a creative leap to some degree. But yeah, I think your question is a fair one, and that is this column a little bit too overlit? Maybe, and that's maybe I could go back into my ambient layer here and paint in a little bit more of the natural light look to maybe take some of the harshness of that highlight away. I mean, there's no real, I'm painting as we're talking, there's no real rule there. Ultimately, and again, I kind of moved through a little quick. You want to do what works best for your eye. I don't mind bending the rules a little, is my point. And how I process this shot for you guys, you know, on a Friday might be different than how I process it for myself on a Monday morning, right? So there's always that kind of flexibility. But you're right. Look for motivation for your light direction. 100%, 100%. But here's where your ambient light becomes your best friend, because without my ambient light, maybe that is a little too overlit feeling. And then I drop my ambient layer and oh, it softens it a little. Okay. Any other questions about Photoshop? Well, I'm going to jump back to the keynote because we have about 8-10 minutes. And I know I'm talking to PPA photographers. Everybody's here and wants to make a living. And I guess we can talk a little bit about how I make money as an interior and architectural photographer. Obviously, I'm an assignment-based photographer. I'm for the most part, I am not going out on my own, getting amazing shots with my fingers crossed, hoping to license them to somebody. People are hiring me to take pictures for them. I'm an assignment-based photographer. I'm typically charging for my time, and I'm charging for any other production related expenses. I'm also charging license fees for my work. I think it's very important that we, when it comes to communicating with our clients, they understand that they're not buying me. They're not paying for hours of my life. They're paying for photography. And that to me is what the license fee represents. The license fee represents the work. So when I send out a bill, I'm typically billing for my time plus my work, and those are two distinct line items. Copyright and ownership of my work is crucial, and 999 out of 1,000 of my shoots, I own and keep ownership of the copyrights to my work. There certainly are a very small handful of times where my clients say, Barry, listen, we want to own these pictures. We want full control of these pictures. It's very rare that they ask, and if they do, they pay for that. And then the last revenue stream is, you know, and this is relatively new to me because I have never in my entire career had a passive income. I've made my living one picture at a time, one day at a time for 31 years. Until this year, where I've basically done these video tutorials. I've had people ask for that for a long, long time. And until this year where I really couldn't shoot, I never thought I'd do it. And it's actually pretty cool. And I'm actually speaking with a video production company now where we're going to produce a really, really great piece. It's going to cost us a little bit of money to do so, but it's going to be a really impressive, I don't want to say a how-to, because if you've hung out with me for 2 hours right now, I don't work in how-to. I work in why. Why do I do this? Yeah, how as well is important. But long story short, I'm proud to have, invested hundreds and hundreds of hours into creating some of this material and content that has earned me peanuts, but it has earned me some passive income over these past few months. And so that's another revenue stream that I've had. The inherent costs to running my business. But before we get into costs, are there any questions about money and how I structure my contracts? I kind of spelled a little bit of that out.
I think we're good. Keep going.
Okay. So what's awesome about this business is it really doesn't cost much to own it. Back in the day when I was a really busy working photographer shooting film, I was probably spending $20,000 to $25,000 a year on film and processing. That's a lot of film. That's a lot of process. That's a lot of chemicals. Thankfully, we don't do that anymore. And so my inherent costs are really what's the production, meaning travel costs. Am I hiring assistants? Am I hiring a stylist? Post-production. Post-production to me really means time, because for better or for worse, I'm doing a lot of the post-production myself. I am occasionally hiring a retoucher to do stuff that is just frankly too time intensive. And I don't want to say it's not creative, because that would be disrespectful to the retoucher, and retouching is an art, and processing like this is an art and a skill and a learned craft. I still do most of it on my own, but occasionally I'm hiring other folks to do some retouching and post work for me. Equipment, this is a big one. I think it's essential in my business, and not all photographers feel this way, and not all architectural photographers feel the exact same way I do. But I think we can all agree that shooting with state-of-the-art equipment is important. That is a very big cost for me in my universe. Shooting with phase one equipment is a very expensive endeavor. However, even if you're shooting Nikon, Canon, Sony, whatever it is, staying up to date with the best you can afford, and the best you can afford, I think, is important when you're shooting commercial work, is a huge and probably the only big inherent cost, the most substantial one in my industry. And then for my business, and then marketing. I don't spend a ton of marketing dollars. Thank goodness my website speaks for itself, and people find me. And but especially marketing my tutorials these days, I am spending some money marketing my tutorials. And of course, historically, I've spent some money marketing for my branding. I've paid people who I respect and value their opinion on how do I make my website better? How do I make my logo more modern? Let's take these 5 pictures down off of my website. Do you have another 4 you could put up? That kind of thing. And I think that's really important. Over these past couple of years, I've functioned as a consultant for photographers, primarily people who do what I do, and people who don't just want to learn from me, but they want my opinion on their work. And that's something that I pride myself in. I don't always charge for that opinion, by the way. In fact, I have a really nice community of probably a couple thousand photographers these days. And I'm getting busier these days shooting, but during the kind of layoff, I've hosted, I think, 4, free portfolio reviews where we've had a lot of fun. People share pictures, they send them to me, and we basically do a 2-3 hour portfolio review where we we get to hear me talk, and I get to hear you guys talk about your work. And final thoughts. Are there any final thoughts or final questions or anything you'd like me to talk about? I know we're near the end of our time together.
Anybody have chance, unmute yourself and weigh in, ask questions. This is your chance. Go for it.
Yeah, this is Cliff. I just want to say I'm a portrait guy, but this is one of the best planned, one of the most interesting tutorials I've ever seen. I think it was really exceptional.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Well, I appreciate that, and I won't spend too much time patting myself on the back. I just know this. I do everything one way, and that's, I put 100% of myself into it. I'm still learning. I'm still learning about how to do tutorials. I'm still learning about how to communicate over Zoom. It's not easy, let's be honest. But when I committed to do this for Susan, it's the same way I commit to everything. And that's just to do the best I can and give 100% of myself. And I try to do that on every photo shoot. So thank you for that.
Barry, how about you stop sharing your screen, and so we can see you for a few seconds, so you can see everybody.
See my, okay, let me figure this out. Stop share.
There you go. So there, yeah, so we
and
can say hi to everybody. Because
Hey,
you didn't
guys.
realize that a lot of people came online during your speaking. So this is your class. They all stuck
Oh,
around.
cool. Thank you,
So
guys.
I'm like,
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Well, I will
yeah,
say this, and I know Susan's going to be my advocate at some point, but you guys, you can reach out to her to get my email. If you ever wanted to send me any work, just to say, hey, I'm doing this real estate now, and what do you think? It'd be my pleasure to offer you my thoughts. I don't charge for emails. But once I have your email, if and when, I'm hoping to do at least one more this year, another free kind of portfolio review, and they've been pretty well attended. People generally send 2 or 3 pictures, and depending upon how much time, we'll look at 2 or 3 pictures per photographer. And we've had like 30, 40, 50 people show up, so it's pretty cool. So that's awesome. And of course, again, I'll let Susan be my advocate. If you guys are interested in looking at more of my work, please go to my website. And if you're interested in any of my video tutorials where I'm a little bit slower, I would suggest that you kind of take a look at that, and you can download them, you can watch them, you can stop, you can fast forward through the boring parts and so forth.
I've already put your website in our chat, and
Cool.
I'm going to save this file, our chat file too, and we'll send out links afterwards. For those that have signed up for this event and the conference in general, we'll actually send this link back to you so that you can go back through the cool Photoshop, because I kid you not, every time we do one of these cool events and someone teaches us Photoshop, we learn something new that we didn't know before. We all learned about luminosity, but you taught us a different way to do luminosity this round. So you'll have access to this, and then by all means, yeah, reach out to Barry. He's just awesome and just so helpful.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we kind of scratched the surface, admittedly, today, but I wanted to kind of, this wasn't really a demo session. I mean, Susan didn't want me to sit down and spend 2 hours in Photoshop. I wanted to do something a little bit more entertaining and something a little bit more kind of, historical, if you will, to kind of talk about myself and my work. But I certainly look forward to hearing from you guys and getting a chance to see what you guys are doing. I mean, this is what makes photography awesome, is you can get inspired by somebody who does something completely different. And I love portrait photography, and I love landscape photography. Anytime you get to hold the camera in your hands is a joy. I don't get to do that a lot, actually. I got to have a camera on a tripod most of the time, and it can be quite liberating to have that camera in your hand. And so I look forward to seeing what you guys do.
So this pretty much ends this. Barry, thank you again for helping us.
You're
this
welcome.
was awesome. Barry
you.
can actually sign off if he wants. We literally, we actually have a 7-minute video with Duraplaque. That's one of our vendors. So if you guys are kind of cool, I will share their video. I'm going to blast their music really loud. Barry, if you want to stay and watch the video, you can. At 2,